governor at that time, but he easily made his peace with the fact that as the deputy governor, Coyne was the logical choice as successor to Towers, and he chose to regard it as an issue about which reasonable people could disagree, and never really made much of an issue of it. Some years later, when he was governor, he made a speech one morning in Quebec City. The son of Louis Saint-Laurent, the former prime minister, was in the audience, and he made himself known to my father after the speech. Dad asked to be remembered to his father. Saint-Laurent Fils said that he saw his father for lunch every day and would convey Dad's regards. And he came back later in the afternoon with a message from the old man. He said he wanted my father to know that he wanted to appoint him governor of the bank in 1955, but the pressure from the Montreal bankers not to appoint a Jew had been overwhelming. And he was now, as an old man, very glad to get this out of his chest. So take that for what it's worth. When I discuss cases with my students and residents, at the end I like to say, well, what is the take home here? And I think that the take home here is that the next time somebody, there's an appointment of somebody who's Jewish as the governor of the Bank of Canada, it's going to be an absolute non-event, number one. And secondly, similarly, what a long way we've come as we celebrate the 150th year of Canada's Confederation. So, as Lowell and I said in our song for Dad's 75th birthday, in the end it turned out fine for your father and for mine. He was certainly very conscious that it had worked out fine. After he retired as the governor of the bank, he wrote, and again I'm quoting him here, "I have been very fortunate in my professional as well as my personal life. I can also remember him saying that he was particularly lucky to have had work that he found interesting and that he appreciated all of those around him whom he regarded as taking part," and again these are his words, "in a continuous conspiracy to work as hard as they could to try to make me look good." Mr. Thiessen was certainly one of the people who did that. Finally, I think that his most telling judgment about the reason for his success in life was what he once said to me: "I like people, and I think they like me." Thank you all for coming, and thank you for helping us to remember our beloved father. Lola, you have something you're going to say now?
Yes, I will add. Hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you very well.
What you around?
Michael, as Dad would say, that was a very satisfactory talk. And I just want to add one or two anecdotes to sort of fill out the picture. One happened when I was coming to the end of my first year at the University of Toronto in 1963. And I was in a little bit of a panic about my exams, especially my economics exam. So I called Dad and I said, I don't know what to do. He said, well, why don't you come home and I'll see if I can help you out. So I came home and he had a pile of books as high as his bed, mostly textbooks, economics textbooks. He said to the librarian, I'm pretty sure I know enough economics to run the Bank of Canada, but I'm not sure I can pass a first-year economics exam. So he coached me for the weekend, and I have to say to this day I feel a little bit guilty that I got the only A+ I ever got because of his help. Then fast forward, I always felt totally supported by him as a father. Fast forward about 30 years later, when my son Jeremy was in his first year at Yale, and Chuck mentioned Bretton Woods. That was the 50th anniversary of Bretton Woods, and he took Jeremy with him to that anniversary, and it seemed to have quite an impact on my son, who then went on to study economics.
I should
The
pull it. Let me
last trip that Dad ever paid was to Jeremy's graduation, where I remember him sitting out in the rain in the quad, watching Jeremy graduate with the economics prize, which he was very, very proud of. The other anecdote that I wanted to share, because I remain inspired by this story. Michael mentioned Dad's special friend, Jerry Gray, who's with you tonight, and she was 30-some years younger than he was, and he really tried his best to keep up with her. And I remember one day I was in Ottawa visiting for the weekend, and she invited us to go to a friend's exhibit, art exhibit, somewhere in Gatineau, I think it was. And we got there, and the exhibit was in a kind of tree house. It was way, way up. The stairs get up to the exhibit were almost like a ladder. And I was thinking, I don't think you can do this. But he insisted on climbing up all those stairs, or rungs. We thought we'd have to get the fire department to bring him back down. But that was just an example of how he felt that, if something's worth doing, you just go all out and go for it, even if it means you're uncomfortable. You have to step outside your comfort zone. And that's been a real inspiration to me. He remains an inspiration to all of our children, Michael's children too, because he just cared a lot. He spent a lot of time and was incredibly considerate, always wanting the best for all of us. He'll always be with us. Thanks for letting me tune in.
Thanks, Michael and Lola. That was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Just remember that people who are great public figures that can find the time and the wherewithal to be also great parents, that just escalates our appreciation of them. It's a wonderful pleasure to welcome the sixth governor of the bank, who served in that capacity from 1994 to 2001. He worked at the bank for 38 years, from 1963 to 2001. A very dignified and highly respected individual. It's a delight for us to have you here with us, Gordon Thiessen, and please welcome.
Well, thank you. It's a great honor to be here, to have a chance to speak, although I must say, after Chuck's presentation and the wonderful comments you've heard from Michael and Lola, I'm not sure that there's much to add to that. So I will just add a few comments about life at the Bank of Canada when Lou was the governor. I worked under him for 10 years. You've heard all the crucial things of Lou's career from Chuck, so I'm just going to try and add a little bit of color at the bank, what was like at the bank during Lou's terms as governor. As you've heard, I arrived in the summer of 1963. That was 2 years after he'd been named governor. And at the time, the bank, as you've heard from Chuck, was still coming to terms with the events of 1961, when James Coyne had essentially been fired by the Diefenbaker government. And the staff at the bank at the time was all rather distressed about the way Coyne had been treated. And most of the bank supported him in what he'd done, but the economic analysis side of the bank felt that in part Coyne had been some of the author of his own misfortune. They had been at odds with some of the views that he'd taken, especially the campaign that he followed at one point about Canadians living beyond their means. And the view was that he was straying rather too far from the mandate of the bank, and they disputed some of the economics that was underlying the Coyne view. And the bank, at the time I came, was really seriously split as a result. And what Lou had to do in his first years of governor was to basically ensure that the bank would operate cohesively, that they repair the loss of confidence in the bank. And he was perfect for the job. As you've heard, he was the bank's deputy governor on international matters. He had not been involved in the coin affair. And everyone knew about his role at Bretton Woods, setting up the International Monetary Fund and the new international monetary system. And Lou was the representative of the bank and of Canada international meetings, so within the bank, he was widely admired and respected. He also was the most perfect image for a central bank governor. None of us could match that. Elegant and eloquent. And so Lou was able to repair the damage done to the bank with the coin affair internally and rebuild its reputation. As you've heard, his term did not start easily. The mismanagement of the currency by the Diefenbaker government, there was subsequently a need to stabilize a falling Canadian dollar and by moving back to the fixed exchange rate. Of course, as a Bretton Woods participant, Lou was quite happy to see the bank back in the good graces of the IMF and part of the IMF system of fixed exchange rates. And it is sort of ironic that Canada had to leave that system and return to a floating rate currency in 1970, right near the end of Lou's term as governor. I don't actually remember in the debates at that time that he opposed it, because we really didn't have a choice at that time. There was no choice but to let the dollar float. And I must say, for most part, the fixed exchange rate between 1962 and 1970 was kind of non-controversial in Canada, and it really did help Lou reestablish the bank's good reputation. And it also enabled him to keep, or enabled the bank, I should say, to have a low public profile. Lou felt it was necessary after the coin years, when the bank was so frequently a matter of dispute in the press and in Parliament, that the bank should keep a rather lower profile than before. And it probably was the right strategy, but I have to say to you, the Canadian public never really got to know Lou Rasminsky the way they know central bank governors these days. Of course, he was well known and highly respected and appreciated in the financial community and internationally. But the fact that ordinary Canadians didn't know them as they know Steve Paulus or Mark Carney, I think is too bad, because this was a man that they should well have known and appreciated. Now, the bank was a relatively hierarchical institution in my early days, so that Michael has already told you about the very first time that I got called up to see the governor in his office. And it was in the late 1960s. Milton Friedman from the University of Chicago was getting a lot of attention, calling central banks to pay more attention to the supply of money in running monetary policy. And so in the bank's research department, we were asked to prepare a paper on monetarism and present it to the senior officers of the bank. Well, it was a group effort. I, in the bank terminology, held the pen and made the presentation. A day or so later, as you've heard from Michael, I got this call that the governor wanted to see me. I have to tell you, I was seriously worried at the time. I thought, what had we done? Had the presentation in the paper really been inappropriate? And as you've heard from Michael, we had this conversation. Of course, Governor Rasminsky, in his usual way, put me at ease. But the main point he wanted to pass on to me, as you've heard, was that the paper was very well written and well presented. And I was really kind of taken aback at that. I thought we were here to have a big debate about Milton Friedman and monetarism. And I have to tell you that it was only many years later, when I was sitting in the governor's chair, that I finally understood what Lou was trying to say to me. The governor of the Bank of Canada, you know, is a bit like the chief economist for Canada. And he or she is expected to be able to explain and give advice on economic issues that affect Canada. And there are always a lot of issues. So that a briefing paper that's well written and clearly explains an issue means that you as governor are able to deal with it in public in an authoritative way. And let me tell you, that's incredibly helpful. Finally, because nobody else has mentioned it, I must tell you about Lou, the art aficionado of the bank. Now, when I arrived in 1963, a decision had been made to build a new building. It didn't actually get started until 1969. But the wonderful building we have today is the result of one person, Lou Rasminsky. Nobody else would have hired the avant-garde Arthur Erickson to build a new building for the Bank of Canada. And Arthur Erickson was encouraged to join the bank's traditional architects and surround the original Bank of Canada building with these reflective glass towers that are now regarded as architectural gems. I mean, it really was extraordinary. And people who saw the Bank of Canada building said to us, "My goodness, that's glorious, but it doesn't look like a central bank, you know." Central bank and glass buildings? Because central bank buildings were always built as fortresses. The other thing I have to mention is that the year or so before he retired, Lou ensured that the bank's modest art budget was